it's never fair to come after the choir. Nothing I say is going to be as good. We can all just go home now. But since it says in your order of service I'm supposed to talk, I guess I will. So normally we don't do product placement from the pulpit, but today I'm going to do a shameless plug for our new adult RE course, Building Your UU Theology. I will be facilitating it for 10 weeks on Monday afternoons from 1 to 3, starting March 4th here at UUCDC. If all goes well and people think it's worthwhile, I hope to run it again in the evenings in the fall. Now, over the past few weeks, we've been talking about UU values, our varied individual beliefs, and how tricky it can be to explain our religion to other people. About a year ago, I was talking to a Baptist minister. He was working on his Sunday sermon, and I was working on my worship associate reflection. He said, "I don't want to offend you, but do you want to hear a joke about UUs?" "Sure," I said, "I love UU jokes." What do you get when you cross a UU and a Jehovah's Witness? Someone who knocks at your door and has nothing to say. Well, I laughed and we parted kindly, but it felt like a missed opportunity. There had to be a better, more accurate punchline. So a full year later, and much too late for a comeback, I think I might have said, we knock on your door and how you feel about being a part of universal love and interdependence. Yeah, but then it wouldn't have been funny. UU struggle to explain our faith in modern America because our culture assumes that religions are built on a set of articulated beliefs. Either you believe this set of metaphysical ideas and are part of our religion, or you don't and you aren't. In May of 2004, Texas Comptroller Carol Keaton Strayhorn actually stripped the Red River Unitarian Universalist Church of Denison, Texas, of their tax-exempt status, ruling that Unitarian Universalism was not a religion because it did not have one system of belief. She reversed her decision within weeks, but our culture continues to assume that belief system or creed equates with a religion. I would like to propose an alternative definition, one that we will be exploring in Building Your UU Theology next month. UU Druid priest and theologian John Beckett writes that the root of the word religion is religare, the Latin word meaning to bind together. Religion literally means what binds us together. Some religions are bound together by creeds, specific beliefs that all members must share. But Beckett writes that in the ancient pagan world, belief was not the litmus test of one's religious devotion. Instead, an individual's religion described what they did, whose they were, and who they were. Modern Unitarian Universalism returns to the old root religare by answering these questions within our communities. What do we do? Both Unitarians and Universalists long viewed their faith as a call to action. From the late 1700s onwards, Universalists argued that the infinite, radical, divine love made the institution of slavery anathema. How could one of God's children ever own another? Today, that fierce love still binds us together with all existence in the interconnected web of life. It affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every individual and calls us to acknowledge our shortcomings and dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our communities. Our optimistic Universalist ancestors affirmed that revelation grows richer every day. We can participate in that revelation through a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We encourage and support each other in our spiritual growth. Most importantly, we can bring about heaven on earth by our actions in the here and now. Both Unitarian and Universalist ancestors worked tirelessly for peace, justice, and equity in human relations. and when we have fallen short, we have returned to the call of universal love and tried once again. At UUCDC, we answer the faithful question, what do we do, in a myriad of ways. Some of us help with worship, some others teach RE, some offer hospitality at coffee hour, some run our AV systems so that those who can't make it into our building can still join us in worship. Our annual NAACP Scholarship Fund provides $2,000 a year for 4 years to students selected by the NAACP Chester chapter. Our Anti-Racism Coalition helps us enact anti-racism practices within our congregation and in the larger community. Our Climate Action Team helps us live more lightly on the earth. The Hunger Task Force supplies dinner to Upper Darby Life Center Shelter each month, and each week our volunteers provide 125 to 150 pounds of fresh produce to the Media Food Bank, plus whatever food and personal item donations you place in the wooden box in the entry hall. We broaden our reach in the community through our monthly Share the Plate program, ensuring that our financial support goes to the many, many groups who are working to make meaningful change in the wider world. If any of these sound like things you'd like to help with, or if you would like to find other ways to live into the religious question, what do we do? Growth Through Service Committee would love to connect with you and help you engage in those, or they would love to have you join their sacred work of connecting each of us with our sacred and beloved service. At the root, however, all of our social justice work grows from the covenants we make with each other. UU covenants are promises about the work we will do and the way we will engage in our community. In our congregations, covenants bring together the first two questions of religare. What do we do, and whose are we? Whose are we? We are part of a beloved community, and our covenants shape how we do the work of that beloved community. In her Time for All Ages, Chrissy shared some of the covenants our children have created to bind their RE classes together. Each of our Soul Matters groups and our adult RE classes, like Building Your Youth Theology, do the same. This summer, the UUA grapples with this question as it updates Article 2, and we met JetPig once again in service this morning. Our own congregation rewrote its covenant last month to define the way we act with each other. We covenant to embrace one another in community by welcoming all with open heart and generous spirit, seeking to understand others with grace and patience, speaking our truths bravely and respectfully, creating space for all to be heard, acknowledged, and valued. We build our covenants on the UU virtues of love, justice, equity, and transformation, plurality, interdependence, and generosity. We hope that our beloved communities reflect our values. We strive together to live out those values in our congregations and in the larger world. But what about the third aspect of religare? Who are we as individuals? How do we live out these UU virtues ourselves? What aspects call to us? As UUs, we recognize that each individual builds their unique answers to these questions. We don't just recognize it, we celebrate it. And then we don't talk about it. I hope that in building your UU theology, you will find a safe space to explore these interesting and complicated questions. Our new covenants calls on us to speak our truths bravely and respectfully, and to create a space for all to be heard, acknowledged, and valued. Together we can support each other as we explore our personal UU theology. But what is theology? As religion has become equated with belief, so theology has become equated with the nature of the big G God. But a second, more helpful definition of theology is simply the study of religious questions. In other words, theology is the study of religare, what binds us together. I believe that what binds us together as UUs is answering the questions, what do we do in service to the wider world, and whose we are in our beloved communities. Our answer to who we are, our personal theology, binds us together as individuals. Each of us answers that question in their own way. As an example, my family has allowed me to share our unique and complementary UU theologies. When I was growing up, my parents, my brother, and I attended the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Atlanta, Georgia. My mother's family went to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church in Bethesda, Maryland, back before the Unitarians and Universalists merged in 1965. In high school, she and my uncle were actively participating in LRY, Liberal Religious Youth. I grew up with stories of my mom helping guide youth group trips, in which, among other things, she was responsible for checking sleeping bags to make sure the kids weren't sleeping together. She said she couldn't figure out why sleeping was a problem. It was only when they were awake they got in trouble. Ah, the 60s. Ours was a nurturing family for a kid wrestling with the big questions of life, especially since each family member responded to religare, what binds us together, in different ways. My mother trained as a children's librarian, but since both my brother and I had special needs, she chose to stay home with us. I am forever grateful that she was able to do so, because she was and is my touchstone for practical, ethical, spiritual guidance. When I was in 5th grade, I came home from school to tell my mom that my Southern Baptist friend was terrified that I was going to hell. Now, I wasn't concerned because I knew hell didn't exist, but I didn't know how to explain UUism to her and comfort her. My mom said to tell her that we believed God is love, Jesus was a great teacher, and that we follow the UU golden rule: do unto others as they would have done unto themselves. Bernice seemed much relieved the next morning, and I found this to be a pretty good summary of UU values when I'm speaking to people like her. My mother lives out her UU life quietly. For my mom, religion goes beyond words. Looking at a broken, hurting world, she responds by sharing compassion, kindness, and gently creating a calm, safe space for others in her orbit. She listens to me maunder about the meaning of life, and then goes out with her camera into the woods and really looks at stones and tree bark and water ripples. When she crops her pictures, entirely new universes appear out of a piece of stone the rest of us would have stepped on. My father similarly sees the world in different ways. Like me, he has always been enchanted with the mystery and the wonder of life. As a young man, he considered entering the ministry, but he realized he had a problem with dogma. His Methodist pastor was honest. Yes, he said, you have to believe the Apostles' Creed is literally true if you want to be a Methodist minister. Well, that wasn't the career for my father. Instead, my dad turned his wondering eyes to his microscope and the alchemical mysteries of microbiology. Who needs magic when we have the Krebs cycle, that miraculous process that turns glucose from food into energy to power every cell in our body? Current research suggests that 4 billion years ago, life began when the energy of the Krebs cycle gave floating chemical compounds the energy to create self-replicating DNA. The story of life is really the story of energy flows that grow and change, bringing order and meaning to the world. At dinner, my father told us about the unique genetic code in our mitochondria, these tiny power-producing organelles in our cells that were once independent bacteria. Once upon a time, in the deep past, a mitochondria was swallowed by a bigger cell. It struck a bargain: energy for the larger cell in exchange for protection. This ancient moment of profound, risky collaboration shapes every plant, animal, and fungal cell today. We sit here together now because two ancient cells chose to be partners. What more profound binding together could there be than that? What could be more unifying across all life on this earth than flows of energy? And yet my father's research showed that when our mitochondria begin to fail, our life energy falters. Diseases that seemed inexplicable became understandable, even potentially treatable, when seen through the lens of energetics. Through mitochondrial medicine, my father and his colleagues have taken the scientific and religious question of who are we to a biochemical level, and answered the religious cultural question, what do we do, by finding treatments for mitochondrial diseases. No false dogma required to do the ancient, sacred work of exploring reality and healing the sick. My family was and remains quite close. My brother and I spent our weekends hiking with our parents in the Appalachian Mountains. Both of us, I think, find peace and connection in the wild places of forests and mountains. David and I took slightly different spiritual paths as adults, although both of us lean into mysticism and nature spirituality. My brother went on to become an herb gardener in a utopian life-sharing community in New York. David's community roots its seasonal rituals and shared spirituality in the Christian mysticism of Rudolf Steiner. Walking in the hills around his community and working in the gardens with his fellow villagers and co-workers centers my brother in his life. We both read tarot cards to open ourselves to the greater wisdom of the universe. But for David, religare, what binds us together, is about community. After several years in Camp Hill Village, David joined the anthroposophic Christian tradition that much of his community shares. For him, the myths of Christianity are less important than the connections forged by shared rituals and sacred language in his home village and in the land that they tend. If David's religare is communal, then mine is highly individual. I think most kids wonder about the big questions of life, the universe, and everything. I certainly did, a lot. There is a joke about the UU child who goes to Sunday school with their Christian friend. At the end of class, the teacher hands out paper and crayons for the kids to draw. Trying to be welcoming, she asks the UU child what they're drawing. "I'm drawing the face of God," says the UU child. "Oh, sweetie," says the horrified Sunday school teacher, "no one can know what God looks like." "They will when I'm done," says the UU child. Yeah, that was totally me. I was fortunate to have the family that I did. No one was surprised or offended by my questions. When I told my dad that I imagined being a teeny tiny little person living on an electron, spinning around the nucleus of an atom in one of my cells, he thought that was fascinating. From the perspective of that minuscule person, I said, the atom was their solar system, the cell was their galaxy, and my body was infinitely beyond their comprehension. I would, in effect, be God, at least from their perspective. My dad and I had a great time with this insight. What does infinity really mean? How tiny can a world be? What's the nature of God? How would you know if such a being existed? Would knowing have any meaning in practical terms? And then I went to school the next morning and I told my friends about it and I shocked their good Southern Baptist hearts again. I have continued to have mystical insights occasionally throughout my life. In a UU group during my 20s, we shared a guided meditation to see our personal representation of the divine. I saw the world tree. I stood inside it and became a node in the vast network of existence that forms it. I was transformed. And then the meditation ended, and I opened my eyes, and I had to figure out what to do with that experience. So here I am, 20 years later, still working on that question. In my 30s, I participated in a Building Your Own Theology class at another UU congregation. It helped me better understand my meeting with the world tree. Now I'm in my 40s and looking forward to taking the class again. After all, revelation is never sealed, and a lot has happened in the last 10 years. Perhaps most notably, I became a practicing druid. My childhood connection with the natural world, the universal consciousness I felt in the world tree, and the teeny tiny person who lived on the electron all come together in the idea of animism. The spiritual concept of animism proposes that all things are, in their own unique ways, alive and conscious. And as a result, our world is made up of infinitely complex sacred relationships, both with a human and a more than human world. We talk to our pets as persons, fellow members of our family. Some of us talk to our houseplants or the trees in our yard. Some of us have profound connections to our home neighborhoods or particular landscapes. For me, religare, what binds me together, is the sacred connection with all these individual beings, whether modern society would consider them to be alive or not. Animism frames my response to the religious question, who am I? I am a node in the great web of life that I call the world tree. Whose am I? I am a part of many beloved communities. What do? I must live lightly on the earth. All the earth is alive, conscious, and sacred. I must work for peace, justice, and compassion in human and in more than human relations. As my father said at dinner when we were children, all cellular life evolved once upon this earth 4 billion years ago. We are direct, biological kin with every other organism. We are family. As my mother said, we follow the UU golden rule, do unto others as they would have done unto themselves. Remember that they are kin. What binds you together? Who are you in your deepest, most faithful moments? Whose are you? Which are your beloved communities? And what do you do when you live deeply into your Unitarian Universalism? Here in this sacred space, may we begin to explore these answers, surrounded by the warmth of radical love and safe in the knowledge that revelation forever grows. May we find ways to continue our theological journeys throughout our lives. And if you are interested, I hope you will join me as we build our UU theologies together. Blessed be.